Mount Everest. Standing at 8,850 meters, the mountain has stirred the imagination and courage of man for centuries. Hundreds have died trying to climb to its summit, and now a city slicker with a borrowed sleeping bag but a lot of heart is about to attempt to trek to its third base camp. This is the Everest Podcast.
And welcome to episode 12 of the Everest Podcast. My name is Eric, and what a story I have for you today. This is going to be a pretty interesting episode for all of you guys. Today is the first day of our actual trek in Everest. And I apologize for my sniffles. It's actually pretty cold where we are right now. And that actually is Everest Base Camp at 17,160 feet. I'm currently sitting in my tent, and it's pretty cold. It's getting cold really quickly. For this podcast, what I'm going to do every so often, I think, is throw out a word of the day, just as another sort of recurring feature of the podcast. Yesterday's word of the day is going to be monk, just because we had so much fun yesterday with the monks, chucking pieces of bread at them and having one of them jack my shoes as a gag. Today's word is going to be splitting headache, and we'll get to that in a moment. But let me just begin by covering some of the highlights of the day, like I always do. Our trek began this morning from Rongpu Monastery. That was around about 16,400 feet, and we climbed about 500, 600 feet today. Actually 600, 700 feet today. And we did that in a span of about just under 3 hours, probably 2.5 hours. That includes a lot of stops for me to take pictures, as I am kind of a paparazzi, and every time I turn a corner or look another direction, I see another photograph. It's kind of my vice. So all in all, it was a good trek. No problems, actually. I didn't really have any problems with breathing or with energy or with the altitude, so that was great news. But more importantly, the view along the trek was just unreal. Pretty much every corner we turned, we got another shot of Everest straight in front of us. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention, I woke up this morning to find Everest greeting me right through my window. And it was almost a perfectly clear day with just a few clouds sitting in front of Everest, and we could clearly see the peak, and it was just an unbelievable sight to see. But along the trek, where we get closer and closer to Everest, it's about 7 or 8 kilometers to Everest. I can't do the quick conversion in my head, and I apologize for using both U.S. metric and then like kilometers and meters and sort of interchanging them, because that's the data that I have, and I don't have the quick conversion with me. But anyway, it was a relatively good trek, and along the way you just keep seeing Everest looming closer and closer. But we were blessed with unbelievably good weather. At times it was pretty warm. With the sun bearing down, it was probably easily in the 60s, high 60s, to the point where it was actually getting really hot, and the sun was really baking the top of my head, and I had to put a hat on. But as soon as the sun disappeared and as we started getting higher, it started getting colder as well, and that's actually something which we're gonna have to deal with for the rest of this trek. That the big fluctuations in temperature by day, since we're just so close so close to the sun, relatively speaking, and more importantly at such a thin altitude, the sun has a pretty powerful effect during the day, but then in the night and in the morning it cools off pretty quickly. So you gotta wear layers. That's the key. So anyway, the trek was great. The first trek from Rongpu, the first leg of the trek, which is today, from Rongpu to Everest Base Camp, is actually along a road, and it's the last stretch of road to Everest. After Everest Base Camp, it's just path and trails. So along the way, we did see some cars driving by, more like trucks that are supporting various expeditions, as well as some horse-drawn little carts driven by local Tibetans for tourists who are just here for the day or two, just to check out Everest Base Camp and then hurry back before the altitude gets to them. In one of these carts, we actually saw this Japanese lady sucking oxygen out of a tank. So it makes you wonder just how touristy this whole place has gotten, and obviously I'm including myself in that as well, being who I am and how unprepared I am with mountaineering, and the fact that I can actually climb down to Base Camp 3. Definitely this place has turned a corner, I think, in terms of becoming so much more commercial. But anyway, I digress. We, after about 2.5 hours, arrived at Base Camp. I was feeling pretty good. But then all of a sudden, in about 15-20 minutes, I got hit hard with this just splitting headache. It just wouldn't go away. For the next 4 hours, I well, before I get to that, so splitting headache, another hour or so after we arrived, it started raining. It started pouring. And the rain kept on coming for the next 6 hours. And it just wouldn't stop, and it alternated between rain, hail, snow. My tent started leaking. I had to prop rocks underneath my tent to sort of prop up the tarp underneath my tent to try to keep things, my luggage and my packs as dry as I could inside. But, you know, that's what you get when you're camping outdoors. That's how you rough it, I guess. But pretty miserable. But with my splitting headache, I was alternating between trying to nurse my headache by taking these quick little naps that I never really fell asleep during. I was just in so much pain. But at the same time, alternating between that, running out and going to the bathroom because I'm still taking Diamox for the altitude, and that tends to make you want to go pee pretty frequently. And then shifting around my luggage and some of these rocks just to try to keep my luggage dry. And that was pretty much my afternoon for about 6 hours or so. And all the while, it started getting colder and colder. I threw on some thermal underwear, a hat, some gloves, and then finally caved. And I don't usually like taking drugs, but I finally caved and took some Advil, and now I'm feeling great. Besides the cold, I'm feeling really good now, which is fantastic because, you know, the headache is definitely one of the first indications of altitude sickness, and the fact that it hadn't gone away in the last 6 hours was starting to really bother me. But now that it's disappeared with the Advil, pretty much means it's not altitude sickness. It probably just means I'm just had a normal headache, and more than likely also was probably dehydrated, since I only drank about 1 liter of water for the whole day so far. Sort of is what I tend to do. I don't drink enough water normally, so I was dehydrated as well. So hopefully I'll change that. I'll start loading up on water going forward, and hope that these headaches never come back. Now, Everest Base Camp is kind of just a random assortment of these tents, large and small, situated right at the base of the Everest Valley, and right next to this little stream of glacier melt. And honestly, when you turn the corner and sort of come up on Everest Base Camp, it's pretty romantic looking. I mean, it's at the foot of the tallest mountain in the world, right next to this babbling brook, and it's beautiful. When you get closer, though, then you sort of discover what the reality of the situation is. You find garbage strewn everywhere. There is crap, feces, both human and animal, all over the campsite, like next to tents, just everywhere, literally, in various stages of drying and of desiccation. and there are some sort of very, very crude toilets, and let me tell you, you will never smell anything more foul than the toilets that are here at Everest Base Camp. You're better off just doing your business outside somewhere and out of sight. So that's Everest Base Camp. It really is just, I mean, it really has become kind of a dump. Surprisingly, there are also just beggars out here. Well, not beggars, but these peddlers who are selling rock fossils and little pieces of jewelry. And it really just goes back to just the observation of how commercial and touristy this whole trek has become, which is kind of sad. Nevertheless, glad to be resting, glad to not have a headache. again, the word of the day, headache. It really was just killing me earlier today. I'm so glad that is abated. I guess the last comment on just the area here is just, it really is just a juxtaposition of beauty and power, with Everest looming far above you. Just the beautiful terrain, and at the same time juxtaposed against just how barren and desolate and almost ungodly the terrain is. You sort of, the first thing you notice is Everest, obviously, and you notice how beautiful it is, but then you take a closer look, and as you're trekking and walking through these barren valleys, you realize just how dead and unwelcoming this territory is as well. It's just interesting to be here, knowing that it's only going to get worse in terms of the environment and the conditions and the weather from here on in. So we'll see what happens. Well, I just want to end today with the normal recurring segment of listen to Eric as he gets stupider, and you may actually possibly pick up some differences from the past few days. The altitude is higher, the air is thinner, and I am still sort of recovering from a headache, so we'll see what happens. First tongue twister. I am a mother pheasant plucker. I pluck mother pheasants. I am the best mother pheasant plucker that ever plucked a mother pheasant. Second tongue twister. Stanleypovsky's little sister is a syphilitic thistle sifter. Stanleypovsky's little sister is a syphilitic thistle sifter. And the third tongue twister. Blue glue gun, green glue gun. Blue glue gun, green glue gun. Blue glue gun, green glue gun. Not so bad, I guess. Although I do have to say that those tongue twisters pretty much left me winded, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for joining in. I'm going to go now try to stay warm and out of the cold, and that's the dinner call. Thank you. Dinner's ready. We'll see what's for dinner, and we'll talk soon tomorrow in our next episode. Just a preview of tomorrow. We will be trekking, starting out early in the morning, to Base Camp 1. Where we are now is Everest Base Camp. It's actually not Base Camp 1 officially. So we'll be trekking to Base Camp 1 tomorrow. The ascent, vertical ascent, is only about 300 feet, but it's a relatively steep ascent, and will take a little while. I think the estimate is about 4 or 5 hours. So we'll see. Hopefully the weather holds up and that we don't get any rain tomorrow morning. So again, if you want more information about this trek, visit my website, and thanks for listening to the Everest Podcast.
For more information on Erick's Everest trek, as well as photos from his trip, please visit his website at www.everestpodcast.com.